second bonus report is called Personas and Amplitude. But what we're doing here is we're actually creating groups of users. Now, we talked about cohorts before, but when we define cohorts, we're defining the criteria. So we're saying we want to do this, and then do this, and this, and this, and this. We're very, very specific about the criteria. This report, on the other hand, actually takes our data. In this case, we're going to look at all active users within the product, and it's going to create groups for us, right? So let's do this. Let's do it here. Let's create 4 clusters or 4 groups, as they call it, right? Now, within each group, we want to focus on some kind of conversion event or some kind of conversion goal. In this case, we're going to look at second week retention, just like we did in our other bonus report, right? And what we get here, right, is Amplitude in this case will run a little bit of machine learning and take all our data and say, here's cluster 1, right? It has 50,000 users. Here's cluster 2. It has X number of users, and so on and so on. And then it'll tell you, how many of these users in cluster 1 are also second week retention, or they qualify for second week retention, right? And then we get a sense. We can see here, of course, cluster 4, it's not as high as cluster 1, 2, and 3, right? So this is all being done automatically for us. And then we want to then find out what are some of the events that seem to be firing more often for each cluster, right? So here's cluster 1. The event most popular for this cluster is actually share song video, which happens 2.72 times compared to 1.59, which is the average of all the users, right? If we go cluster 2, the most popular event is add content to cart, right? And if we go cluster 3, it's actually join community, right? So all of a sudden we start to see a little bit of differences between the clusters. We might say, cluster 3 is all the users who really want to be part of a community and they value that interaction. Cluster 2 is all the users who really like to buy stuff. And cluster 1 is all the ones who really like to share stuff on social media. They're not buying things and not joining the community, but they're sharing stuff on social media, right? And that's really what this report does. It creates clusters for you. Now, the magic number of clusters is actually something that takes some trial and error. It might be 2, it might be 4, it might be 10, it might be 7. In this case, I just chose 4 randomly. Typically, you run the different reports and you want to have clusters who are very distinct from each other, right? Who have very clear, distinct attributes and criteria, where you can say clearly this is cluster 1, the majority of them do this. Cluster 2, that's almost the opposite of that, and so on. And again, once you have them, you can then save them as cohorts, which gives you a certain criteria, and you can use them in reports like we saw before. So we can use it to segment our users, and once again, instead of just looking at averages or all the users, we can now look at a specific clusters. How is cluster 1 did versus cluster 2, and so on. So Amplitude will do this for you automatically. If you actually want to do this with just your data, you can actually run some data science reports and do this kind of analysis. You can actually look at some of the science that Amplitude is using here to understand what that looks like. And other tools are also built in similar reports. So this report and the other one, they're both in the world of machine learning and using that to analyze your data to give you interesting ways to segment your users and understand them better, right? So these are 2 bonus reports. Just like the other one, this will not work if you don't have a lot of data. So if you're just starting out, this is something that's not relevant to you. But once you have data, once you got the fundamentals that we covered before, this can be a cool way to start to interact with your users in a more personalized way and start to engage them in a way that matters to them.